The Apache girl. They hung on a pole for loving a white man. They hung the Apache girl on a pole in the scorching sun, but he didn't let her suffer. The midday heat in Shadow Creek pressed down mercilessly, turning the main street into a shimmering mirage of dust and silence. The rope around her neck was just loose enough to let her breathe, but tight enough to promise a slow death if no one intervened. Only the occasional creak of a weather-beaten sign and the low murmur of townsfolk broke the stillness as they gathered around the crude spectacle at the center of the square. By sundown, a man in the crowd called out, his voice carrying on the hot wind, the Apache witch will be gone. She hung there, arms tied cruelly behind her back, feet barely touching the ground, copper skin glistening with sweat, dark eyes staring defiantly past the crowd. Her name was Talise, though no one in town used it. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, dirt and blood staining the fabric. The neckline gaped where someone had ripped it, exposing more skin than decent, but no one had bothered to fix it. A large purple bruise marked her cheekbone, her split lip caked with dried blood. The crowd kept their distance. 20 or so townspeople standing with arms folded, faces hard as the Arizona clay beneath their boots. Their whispers carried on the hot breeze. She took up with Thornton's nephew, a woman hissed, then had the nerve to stay after he left town. Shameless, another replied. Apache trash, a man spat in the dirt, needs to learn her place. Hanging's too good for her kind. That's when they heard the steady thud of boots and turned to see Holt Morgan making his way down the street. He moved with purpose, a slight limp dragging his right foot, dust clinging to his worn duster coat. The crowd parted instinctively as he approached, the revolver holstered at his hip commanding a certain respect, even from those who despised him. Holt stopped at the edge of the square, weathered face unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. For 30 seconds he simply stood there, taking in the scene, jaw muscles working beneath his salt and pepper beard. His eyes narrowed against the glare, flicked from the woman to the jeering crowd. Then he strode forward. Deputy Marshal Briggs stepped into his path, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, badge gleaming in the sunlight. "This ain't your business, Morgan," Briggs said, voice carrying across the square. "Town's handling its affairs." Holt's eyes, hard as river stones, fixed on the lawman. "Is this what passes for justice now?" Briggs shrugged, a half-smile playing at his lips. "She broke the natural order? Apache girl with a white man? That's trouble any way you slice it." "Where's the man, then?" Holt demanded. "Gone. Left 3 days ago." "So she gets tied up and he rides free." "She stayed. That's her crime." Holt's gaze shifted past Briggs to the woman tied to the post. "You plan to leave her out here till what? She dies of heat stroke?" "She's being made an example." Without another word, Holt pushed past the deputy and walked to the pole. Up close, he could see the rope digging into her wrists, turning the flesh purple. Sweat ran down her neck, soaking the torn dress. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes remained defiant. He pulled his knife from his belt, the blade glinting in the sunlight. "Cut her loose, and you answer to the town," Briggs warned, hand hovering near his pistol. Holt ignored him, sawing through the ropes with deliberate precision. As the last strand gave way, Talise slumped forward. He caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm hand under her elbow. She stiffened at his touch, but didn't pull away. "You want her?" someone shouted from the crowd. "Then take her. She ain't our problem no more." Holt turned, facing down the crowd, arms still supporting Talise. His expression hadn't changed, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Without a word, he turned and helped the woman walk, her steps unsteady as they made their way out of town. "This ain't over, Morgan," Briggs called after them. "Not by a long shot." Holt didn't look back. His ranch lay 2 miles outside Shadow Creek, a modest spread that had seen better days. The fence posts leaned at tired angles, the barn weathered by years of sun and neglect. The main house stood solid enough, a testament to Holt's craftsmanship. But the place had the feel of a man who'd stopped caring about appearances. He led Talise to the storage shed, a simple structure with sturdy walls and a small window. It was empty save for a few crates and tools. "You can stay here," he said simply, his voice rough from disuse. She stepped inside without a word and lowered herself to the floor, back against the wall, knees drawn up. Her eyes watched him warily. "He left," she said finally, her voice surprisingly clear despite her cracked lips. Holt nodded once and left. He returned minutes later with a blanket, a canteen of water, and a plate of cold beans and jerky. He set them just inside the door without comment and retreated to the main house. That night, sitting on his porch with a tin cup of coffee, Holt stared at the storage shed, wondering what had possessed him to bring an Apache woman to his property. It wasn't just the injustice, though that had stirred something in him he thought long dead. It was the look in her eyes, not fear, not gratitude, just a fierce determination to survive. He knew trouble would follow. Briggs had been looking for an excuse to come after him for years, ever since their dispute over water rights 3 summers ago. Taking Talise would give him the perfect reason. As he watched the moonlight cast long shadows across the yard, Holt caught himself wondering if saving her had been worth bringing this trouble down on his head. Then he remembered the rope around her neck, the cruel gleam in Briggs's eyes, and knew there had been no other choice a man like him could make. Holt took another sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitter taste. He hadn't slept in a proper bed since returning from the war, preferring a bedroll near the fireplace. Tonight would be no different, except he'd keep his revolver closer than usual. Morning came with the harsh cry of a circling hawk. Holt was already up, stoking the cook fire, when he heard the storage shed door creak open. Talise emerged, the blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the growing heat. She stood there a moment, taking in the ranch, then approached the water barrel and filled the cup he'd given her. "Why?" she asked, her dark eyes studying him over the rim of the cup. "Why what? Why did you cut me down?" Holt didn't answer right away. He turned the coffee pot on the fire, giving himself time to consider. "You were going to die," he said finally, the simplicity of the answer hanging between them. "I didn't ask for your help." Her voice had an edge to it now. "I know." She watched him a moment longer. "I didn't do anything wrong. They didn't care." He nodded slowly. "They never do." That was all they said for a long while. Holt went about his morning chores, checking the fence line, feeding his 2 horses and the milk cow. When he returned to the house, he found Talise dragging fallen branches away from the chicken coop, working methodically in the growing heat. "Don't need to earn your keep," he said, pausing to watch her work. She straightened, wiping sweat from her brow with her forearm. "I don't sleep with men for shelter," she said bluntly. "I work. I pay my way." "Fair enough," Holt replied with a slight nod. "Could use help with the south fence line." By midday, they had fallen into an unspoken rhythm, working side by side in the blistering heat. Holt noticed she moved with surprising strength and efficiency, her hands calloused from a life of labor. She didn't complain, didn't speak unless necessary, and kept her distance. That evening, after a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Holt heard a sound that made him freeze. The unmistakable metallic click of a revolver hammer being cocked. He turned slowly to find Talise standing in the doorway of the main house, his spare Remington aimed steadily at his chest. "Why did you really bring me here?" she demanded, eyes narrowed to dark slits. Holt remained seated, hands visible on the table. "Told you already. Men don't help women like me without wanting something." The gun didn't waver in her grip. "Thornton's nephew said he'd take me to California, said we'd start fresh. Then he took what he wanted and left me sleeping by the creek." "I'm not Thornton's nephew," Holt said evenly. "Then what do you want?" "Nothing." The gun remained pointed at his chest. "I don't believe you." Holt sighed, shoulders dropping slightly. If I meant to harm you, I wouldn't have cut you down in front of the whole town." She studied him for a long moment, searching his face for deceit. Finally, the hammer eased back down, though she kept the gun at her side. "You know how to handle that?" he asked, nodding toward the revolver. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Better than most." On the third day, Talise spotted riders watching the ranch from the distant ridge. She was hauling water from the well when she noticed the glint of sun on metal, likely a spyglass or rifle scope. She set the bucket down carefully and moved toward the house without seeming to hurry. "Holt," she called softly, "we have visitors." He appeared at the barn door, following her gaze to the ridge. The riders, 3 of them, made no attempt to hide once they'd been spotted. They simply watched for another minute, then turned and disappeared over the ridge. "Briggs's men?" she asked. "Probably." Holt's face hardened. "They're letting us know we're being watched." That afternoon, Holt was repairing the chicken coop when the crack of gunfire split the air. He dropped his tools and sprinted toward the sound, hand on his holstered revolver. At the far end of the property, he found Talise with his Winchester rifle, systematically shooting at a row of tin cans arranged on the fence post. She glanced his way as he approached but didn't stop. The rifle cracked again, another can spinning into the dirt. Her aim was impeccable. "Who taught you to shoot?" he asked, impressed despite himself. "My father." She lowered the rifle, checking the chamber. "He was a chief. Said his daughter should know how to protect herself in a world that wanted her dead." Holt nodded. "Smart man. They killed him anyway." She raised the rifle again, sighting down the barrel. "Army patrol. Said he violated some treaty he never signed." The rifle cracked, the last can flying into the air. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the stars appear one by one, Talise asked, "Why do you live so far from town? You don't seem the type to fear others." Holt considered his words carefully. "After the war, I couldn't stand the noise. Too many people talking about things that didn't matter. Out here, the silence makes sense." "You fought for the Union?" He nodded. "Saw things no man should see. Did things I can't forget." He looked out toward the dark hills. "Some men in the war would sell their own mothers for a chance to live another day. Briggs reminds me of them." Talise studied him in the moonlight. "You've killed men." It wasn't a question, but Holt answered anyway. "Yes, too many." They sat in comfortable silence for a long while after that, the shared understanding of survival hanging between them like a bridge. 3 days later, as Talise hung laundry behind the house, dust rose on the horizon. 3 riders approached from town, the lead horse carrying the unmistakable figure of Deputy Briggs. Holt grabbed his shotgun from beside the door and stepped onto the porch. Talise appeared at his side, Winchester in hand. "Stay inside," he muttered. "No." Her voice was calm, resolute. "They came for me once. I won't hide." The riders pulled up 20 yards from the house. Briggs sat tall in his saddle, flanked by Hiram Thornton and Jack Carter, a local gun hand known for his cruel streak. "Afternoon, Morgan," Briggs called, pushing back his hat. "Just thought we'd ride out. Make sure everything's proper." "Nothing improper about minding my own business on my own land," Holt replied, the shotgun resting casually across his forearm. Briggs's eyes flicked to Talise. "Town council's concerned about your guest. Harboring an Apache fugitive ain't looked on kindly." "She's not a fugitive. She's my hired help." Carter spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "That what they call it these days?" Talise raised the Winchester slightly and Carter's hand instinctively moved toward his holster. "I wouldn't," Holt warned. "She can put 5 shots through a tin can at 100 yards. Reckon a man's chest is an easier target." Briggs's smile tightened. "This ain't over, Morgan. Town's got a stake in how things are run, even out here." "Town can mind its own business," Holt replied. "Now get off my land." The 3 men exchanged glances, measuring the threat. Finally, Briggs tugged on his reins. "We'll be seeing you," he said, turning his horse. As they rode away, Talise lowered the rifle. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "I know." Holt watched until they disappeared from view. "And they want more than just you." "What do you mean?" "I've seen men scouting near my spring up north. Something's got Briggs and Thornton mighty interested in my worthless patch of dirt." That night, they fortified the ranch. Holt moved a stack of hay bales to create a barricade near the barn, positioned water buckets strategically in case of fire, and loaded every weapon he owned. Talise worked alongside him, her movements precise and confident. "You've done this before," he observed as she checked the firing pin on his old army revolver. "My people have been defending themselves for generations," she replied without looking up. "It rarely ends well for us." Later, as they sat on the porch watching the moon rise over the distant mountains, Talise asked, "Why do they hate you too?" Holt took a long pull from his coffee cup. "I don't play their games. Don't drink with them. Don't trade with them more than I have to." He paused. "And Briggs wants my water rights. There's a spring on my property that feeds his grazing land. Been trying to run me off for years." "Is that worth dying for? A spring? In this country? Water's worth more than gold." He set his cup down. "Besides, it's not just about the spring anymore. It's about a man being able to live as he chooses on his own land." She nodded slowly. "My father said similar words before they killed him." Holt glanced at her. "What happened to your people?" "Some went to the reservation at San Carlos. Others scattered." Her face hardened. "I ran before they could herd us like cattle. Lived in the hills for 2 years before Thornton's nephew found you." She nodded. "My own people would kill me now if they knew. Lying with a white man is a betrayal they cannot forgive." Her laugh was bitter. "I belong nowhere." "You belong here now," Holt said quietly, "for as long as you need." Their eyes met briefly in the moonlight, an understanding passing between them. Neither spoke of it again that night. The next morning, Holt rode into town alone. He needed supplies, but more importantly, he needed information. Something about Briggs's visit didn't sit right. The deputy had always been troublesome, but this felt different, more urgent. The general store was nearly empty when he entered, the shopkeeper eyeing him warily. Holt gathered his supplies in silence: flour, coffee, ammunition, aware of the stares from the few customers. As he paid, Hiram Thornton entered, his portly frame blocking the doorway. "Bold move coming to town, Morgan," Thornton said, voice carrying through the store, "especially after stealing what don't belong to you." Holt turned slowly. "Didn't steal anything. Can't steal a person who makes their own choices. That Apache woman has caused nothing but trouble since my nephew brought her around." Thornton stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Word is, you've taken quite a shine to her yourself." "Your nephew abandoned her to be lynched," Holt replied coldly. "What kind of man does that? The kind that knows his place in the world?" Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Something you seem to have forgotten." Holt gathered his supplies. "I know exactly where I stand." As he pushed past Thornton toward the door, the shopkeeper called after him. "They found gold in Coyote Canyon yesterday, just north of your spring." Holt paused, the pieces suddenly falling into place. Coyote Canyon bordered his land to the north. If there was gold there, his water source would be essential for any mining operation. Briggs and Thornton weren't just harassing him over Talise. They wanted his land, and they'd use any excuse to drive him off it. The saloon was his next stop. He found Deputy Briggs at his usual table, nursing a whiskey despite the early hour. Jack Carter sat across from him, cleaning his nails with a knife. "Well, look what the wind blew in," Briggs drawled as Holt approached. "Come to make amends?" Holt remained standing. "Come to make things clear. I know about the gold strike in Coyote Canyon." Carter's hands stilled, the knife poised midair. Briggs's smile faltered for just a moment. Don't know what you're talking about, the deputy said, but his eyes had hardened. My spring feeds that canyon, Holt continued. You need my water for mining. That's why you've been trying to run me off. Briggs leaned back in his chair. You always did think too highly of yourself, Morgan. Nobody wants your miserable patch of dirt. Then stay off it. Holt turned to leave, but Carter's voice stopped him. How's the squaw? Warming your bed yet? Holt's hand twitched near his holster, but he kept walking. He'd made his point. Now he needed to get back to the ranch. He never saw the three men follow him out of town. Halfway back to the ranch, in a narrow pass between two rocky outcroppings, they made their move. The first shot kicked up dust inches from his horse's hooves. The second clipped his saddle horn. Holt drew his revolver as he urged his horse forward, seeking cover behind a large boulder. Three riders closed in from behind, guns blazing. He recognized Carter's distinctive gray hat and Thornton's bay mare. The third man was a stranger, but he wore Briggs's deputy badge. Not Briggs himself, too cowardly to do his own dirty work. Holt fired twice, forcing them to scatter. His third shot caught Carter's horse in the shoulder, sending horse and rider tumbling. The others pulled back, using the rocks for cover as they exchanged fire. A bullet grazed Holt's arm, tearing through his sleeve and drawing blood. Another struck his saddle. He fired his remaining rounds methodically, driving the attackers further back, then mounted and spurred his horse toward home. By the time he reached the ranch, blood soaked his left sleeve and pain radiated from his shoulder. Talise was at the fence line immediately, rifle ready. Ambush, he managed, sliding from the saddle. Carter and Thornton. They know about the gold. She helped him inside, cutting away his shirt to reveal an ugly furrow across his upper arm. Without a word, she cleaned the wound with whiskey, her touch firm but gentle. As she worked, he told her about the gold discovery and what it meant. They won't stop now, she said, binding his arm with strips of clean cloth. Gold makes men crazy. Crazier, Holt corrected, wincing as she tightened the bandage. They were already greedy bastards. That night, they moved Holt's bedroll to the corner of the main room, where he could see both the front door and windows. Talise sat in a chair by the fireplace, Winchester across her lap. Neither suggested she return to the storage shed. The fire had burned low when Holt's breathing suddenly quickened. He twisted in his sleep, muttering words Talise couldn't understand. His face contorted, and a groan escaped his lips. She moved to his side, uncertain, as he jerked awake, reaching for his gun. Easy, she said softly, her hand on his arm. Just dreams. He stared at her, eyes unfocused for a moment, then relaxed slightly. Sorry, he muttered. Happens sometimes. The war? He nodded, settling back. Gettysburg. Always Gettysburg. She didn't press for details, just sat beside him in the darkness. After a while, his breathing steadied, and she thought he'd fallen asleep again. Did you ever kill a man? He asked suddenly, his voice quiet in the darkness. A traitor tried to drag me from a wagon outside Mescalero when I was 15. Her voice was matter-of-fact. I took his own knife and put it in his throat. Holt nodded, understanding in the darkness. They were both survivors. Both carried the weight of their actions. Perhaps that's why they recognized something in each other that others missed. Get some rest, he said finally. I'll take first watch. But it was Talise who remained awake long after Holt's breathing deepened into sleep. She watched the moonlight create patterns on the wooden floor, rifle ready across her knees, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. Dawn broke with a blood-red sky, the sun pushing through clouds like a wound opening. Holt was up early despite his injury, checking ammunition and positioning weapons around the house. Talise had moved hay bales to create firing positions near the windows. They'll come at sunset, she said, no question in her voice. Easier to burn us out in the dark. Holt nodded in agreement. How many you think? 7, maybe 8. Briggs will stay back until the shooting's done. Her lip curled with contempt. Men like him always do. They spent the morning preparing, digging shallow trenches near the house, filling water barrels, creating clear fields of fire. By midday, the ranch had been transformed into a fortress of sorts. Not impenetrable, but defensible. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Holt found Talise sitting on a crate behind the barn, loading cartridges into her belt. She looked up as he approached, a question in her eyes. "Why are you fighting for me?" she asked. "You could give me up. Save your land." He leaned against the barn wall, favoring his wounded arm. "Ain't fighting for you," he said gruffly. "Fighting for what's right. Man stands his ground or he's not a man at all." She studied him for a long moment. "Is that all?" Holt looked away, uncomfortable with the directness of her gaze. "Been alone a long time," he said finally. "Sometimes a man forgets there's more to life than just surviving." She rose from the crate, standing close enough that he could smell the faint scent of sage in her hair. "And now? Now I remember," he said quietly. The sound of approaching horses interrupted whatever might have followed. Talise grabbed her rifle, and they both moved quickly to their positions inside the house. 7 riders appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the setting sun. Briggs led them, flanked by Thornton and a bandaged Carter. The others were strangers, hired guns brought in for the occasion. "Morgan!" Briggs's voice carried across the yard. "Last chance. Send out the woman and clear off your land by morning, and we can end this peaceful." Holt stepped onto the porch, shotgun in hand, Talise positioned at the window to his left. "This is my land, Briggs. Has been for 15 years. You want it, you'll have to kill me for it." "That can be arranged," Carter called, spurring his horse forward. The first shot came from Talise's Winchester, kicking up dirt at the horse's feet. The animal reared, nearly unseating Carter. "Next one won't miss," Holt warned. "Turn around, all of you." Briggs gave a signal, and the riders spread out, circling the property. Holt retreated inside as bullets began to pepper the house. Wood splintered near the window as Talise fired methodically, dropping one rider with a clean shot to the chest. The battle was joined. Holt fired through the south window, catching another attacker in the shoulder. The man tumbled from his horse, scrambling for cover behind the water trough. 2 others dismounted near the barn, attempting to flank the house. Talise shifted positions, firing twice and forcing them back. Then came the fire arrows. The first struck the roof, flames spreading quickly across the dry wood. Holt rushed to the back door, grabbing a bucket of water. Talise provided covering fire as he doused the flames, bullets whizzing past his head. "Behind you!" she shouted. Holt turned to see Carter charging from the barn, pistol raised. He ducked as the first shot splintered the doorframe. The second caught him in the side, the impact driving him to his knees. Through a haze of pain, he raised his shotgun and fired, the blast catching Carter in the legs. The gunman went down howling. Talise was at Holt's side instantly, dragging him back inside. Blood spread across his shirt, but the wound wasn't immediately fatal. She tore a strip from her dress and pressed it against the injury. "Can you shoot?" she asked, voice tense. He nodded, teeth gritted against the pain. "Get to the roof. Better angle." She hesitated, then pressed his revolver into his hand and moved toward the ladder that led to the loft. Moments later, he heard the crack of her rifle from above as she engaged the remaining attackers. Holt dragged himself to the window, using a crate for support. Through the gathering darkness, he could make out 4 figures still in motion: Briggs, Thornton, and 2 others. Carter lay writhing near the barn. 2 more were motionless in the dirt. The Winchester cracked again from the roof, and one of the unknown men dropped. Briggs and Thornton took cover behind the well, pinned down by Talise's accurate fire. The last gunman tried to circle around to the back of the house. Holt waited until the man passed his window, then fired twice. The first shot missed, but the second caught the attacker in the back. He fell face first into the dirt and didn't move again. Then came an ominous silence. No shots, no movement. Just the soft crackle of small fires burning themselves out around the property. Holt scanned the yard, searching for signs of Briggs and Thornton. Nothing. The crash of breaking glass from the back room shattered the quiet. Moments later, smoke began to fill the house. They'd thrown a torch through the window. "Talise!" Holt shouted, struggling to his feet. "Fire!" She appeared at the top of the ladder, taking in the situation instantly. "Out the front! Now!" Holt stumbled toward the door, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Talise dropped down beside him, supporting his weight as they moved. The smoke thickened, stinging their eyes and making it hard to breathe. They burst onto the front porch, gulping the cool night air. Holt raised his pistol, scanning for threats, but the yard seemed empty. They made it halfway to the barn before the shot rang out. Thornton stepped from the shadows, rifle leveled. "Far enough," he said, face twisted with hate. Holt tried to raise his pistol, but his strength was fading. Talise stood firm beside him, her Winchester empty. "Should have stayed with your own kind, squaw," Thornton spat. "None of this would have happened." "My name is Talise," she replied, voice steady. "Daughter of Chief Nantan, and I choose my own path. Your path ends here." Thornton aimed at her chest. The shot that rang out didn't come from Thornton's rifle. It came from behind them, from the direction of the burning house. Deputy Briggs staggered into view, blood streaming from a wound in his leg where one of Talise's bullets had found its mark earlier. "Thornton!" Briggs gasped, his pistol smoking. "You don't get to decide. This was business." Thornton lay sprawled in the dirt, a look of surprise frozen on his face, a dark stain spreading across his chest where Briggs's bullet had struck him. Holt turned to face the deputy, raising his pistol with effort. "Business, Briggs? That what you call this?" Briggs's laugh was hollow. "Gold makes for strange bedfellows, Morgan. Thornton would have killed us all once he had the claim." He gestured to Talise with his pistol. "Send her over here. You can keep your worthless ranch." "No," Holt said simply. Briggs's face hardened. "You're bleeding out, Morgan. You'll be dead by morning anyway." He cocked the hammer of his pistol. "Last chance." "You were there," Holt said suddenly. "At Gettysburg. G Company, 7th Cavalry." Briggs faltered, confusion crossing his face. "What?" "You sold out your own unit, gave our position to the Confederates." Holt's voice was steady despite his weakening condition. 19 men died." "You're delirious," Briggs said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. I recognized you the day you rode into town 5 years ago. Wondered how a traitor ended up with a badge." Holt raised his pistol higher. "Now I know. Some men will do anything for money." For a moment no one moved. Then Briggs's face twisted with rage and he fired, the bullet whistling past Holt's ear. Before he could get off another shot, Talise moved. In one fluid motion, she pulled a knife from her boot, Holt's knife, the one he'd used to cut her free in town, and threw it with deadly accuracy. The blade embedded itself in Briggs's throat. He dropped his gun, hands clutching at the knife, a gurgling sound escaping his lips as he collapsed. Silence fell over the ranch, broken only by the crackling of the burning house and Holt's labored breathing. He slumped against Talise, strength finally giving out. "Inside the barn," he gasped. "Medical kit." She helped him across the yard, past the bodies of the fallen, into the relative safety of the barn. As she tended his wound, hands moving with practiced efficiency, their eyes met. "Why did you stay?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She paused, blood-stained hands hovering above his injury. "Same reason you cut me down from that pole," she replied softly. "Some choices make themselves." "Is it over?" Talise asked later, watching the burning house from the barn door. "For now," Holt replied, propped against a hay bale. "But men like Briggs always have friends. Or brothers." 6 months later, the newly rebuilt Morgan Ranch house stood proudly against the Arizona sky. The spring that had been the source of so much conflict now fed a series of irrigation ditches that brought life to fields that had been barren for years. Holt sat on the front porch, watching Talise hang laundry in the yard. Her movements were slower now, more deliberate, her hand occasionally resting on the gentle swell of her belly. Their child would be born when the winter gave way to spring, a new beginning in more ways than one. The aftermath of the shootout had brought changes to Shadow Creek. With Briggs and Thornton dead, the truth about their schemes had come to light. The gold in Coyote Canyon had proved to be a small deposit, not the mother lode they'd imagined, but enough to attract a few honest miners who were happy to pay for water rights rather than steal them. Talise moved to join Holt on the porch, settling into the chair beside his. Their marriage at the small church in town 3 months ago had raised eyebrows, but no one had dared object, not after what had happened at the ranch. The preacher had hesitated only briefly before performing the ceremony, while townsfolk watched from the back pews, their expressions ranging from disgust to grudging respect. A few, including the shopkeeper who had warned Holt about the gold, had even offered congratulations afterward. "The townsfolk said our child would be a half-breed," Talise said now, touching her growing belly. Holt's hand covered hers. "Our child will be free," he said, "and that's all that matters." "Rider coming," Talise said suddenly, her keen eyes spotting the dust cloud on the horizon before Holt noticed it. He reached for the rifle that was never far from hand, but relaxed when he recognized the distinctive silhouette of Judge Wilson, the circuit court magistrate who had presided over their wedding. "Probably bringing news about Carter's trial," Holt said. The gunman had survived his wounds and now awaited sentencing in the territorial prison for his role in the attack. Talise nodded, her hand finding Holt's. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Holt squeezed her fingers gently. "Together," he agreed. They had chosen each other and they had stayed, not because it was easy or accepted, but because they had found in each other something worth fighting for, a place where they truly belonged. The end.